When I write, I think in terms of music, and there's music on all the time that I'm working. They surprised me for my birthday. He brought the whole band out to Hollywood, set them up on a stage at Paramount, and we've been friends a long time.
They still have to lay bait, set large silo traps, and hire helicopter shooters to cover vast stretches of land inaccessible by road. No magic solution exempts them from this fight. But there's a quiet difference at play here. An ecological link that, when weighed against everything else, is completely absent in Texas. And that's exactly what's about to be revealed. The creature we mentioned at the start of the video is the dingo. It's Australia's largest land-dwelling carnivorous mammal, and across most of its habitat, it holds the position of apex predator, the top of the food chain, a place where no other species poses a threat back to it. This position is exactly what makes the dingo one of nature's most effective ecological regulators, helping control kangaroo populations, as well as invasive species like wild boars and feral rabbits. The way dingoes hunt wild boars doesn't match how humans typically picture a hunt. The dingo is an opportunistic predator. It always favors the easiest, most available prey within reach. In areas with plenty of kangaroos and wild boars, dingoes usually choose to hunt those two species rather than risk attacking livestock, which tends to be more heavily protected by humans. Their preferred targets are piglets and juveniles, young individuals not yet strong enough to fight back. A fully grown wild boar, especially a male with sharp tusks, is a dangerous opponent even for a lone dingo. Because of this, dingoes typically hunt alone or in pairs when targeting smaller prey, but will band together into packs, anywhere from 2 to 12 individuals, when taking down prey too large for a single animal to handle. Most hunts happen at dawn, dusk, or in the dead of night, when both dingoes and their prey are most active. The footage shown at the start of the video is vivid evidence of exactly this. It was recorded and released by the Australian Wildlife Conservancy, one of Australia's leading conservation organizations, in a remote area near the Gulf of Carpentaria, Northern Territory. According to the organization itself, this was the first time such behavior had ever been captured on film this clearly, a lone dingo trailing an entire group of wild boars across open grassland, undeterred by the overwhelming numbers against it. It didn't go after the largest or the nearest boar, but instead patiently isolated the smallest one in the group, the weakest target, and ultimately brought it down successfully, with no human intervention whatsoever. But what truly matters here isn't that single hunting moment. It's the mechanism operating behind it every night across the entire Australian continent. Dingoes don't eliminate at wild boars the way humans do. There's no campaign to wipe out entire sounders, no percentage quota to hit each year. Instead, they continuously suppress the survival rate of piglets, precisely the link that determines the terrifying reproductive rate discussed earlier. Every piglet a dingo catches is one individual that will never reach adulthood, never reproduce, never contribute to that 85% annual growth rate. And this pressure requires no government budget, no equipment maintenance, no humans monitoring camera feeds for weeks on end. It happens naturally every night across the whole continent. The clearest evidence for this role is found right in Australia's own history. Between 1880 and 1885, in order to protect sheep grazing regions from dingoes, Australians built the dingo fence, the longest animal barrier structure in the world, stretching roughly 3,488 miles across the continent. Inside the fence, where dingoes were nearly eliminated entirely to protect sheep flocks, ecologists documented an unintended consequence. Feral cats and foxes, two other introduced predator species, exploded in number, no longer kept in check or driven off by dingoes. At the same time, kangaroo populations also surged due to the absence of a natural predator, leading to overgrazing and land degradation. By contrast, in areas outside the fence, where dingoes remained part of the ecosystem, feral cats, foxes, and kangaroos were all kept at a far more balanced level. In other words, Australians themselves, through an unintended experiment spanning more than a century, ended up proving something no piece of Texas technology ever could. The role of a native apex predator cannot be replaced by human guns, electronic traps, or thermal scopes. At this point, a natural question comes to mind. If dingoes are this effective, why doesn't Texas simply bring them over? The answer is Doing so is far more dangerous than it appears on the surface. First, the dingo itself is an introduced species. It's believed to have arrived in Australia somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 years ago, possibly even earlier according to some recent genetic evidence. And global ecological history has proven time and again, moving a species from one place to an entirely different continent, no matter how good the intentions, can turn a solution into a brand new disaster. The classic example is the cane toad, introduced to Australia to control beetles damaging sugarcane crops, but which ended up becoming the very invasive species that devastated Australia's ecosystems for decades. Second, and perhaps the biggest obstacle, dingoes don't just hunt wild boars, they also hunt sheep, goats, and young calves. This is precisely why Australians had to build a fence over 3,400 miles long back in the 19th century, not to keep wild boars out, but to protect sheep flocks from the very animal being praised in this video. Texas is one of the states with the largest cattle, sheep, and goat industries in the country. Bringing dingoes in would mean trading one problem for another, potentially an even costlier one. Third is the legal barrier. U.S. federal law on importing exotic wildlife into the country is already extremely strict, especially after many costly lessons from other invasive species that were once introduced legally or illegally, only to spiral out of control in the wild. And finally, there's a deeper ecological issue. Dingoes took thousands of years to adapt to Australia's specific climate, terrain, and prey. There's no guarantee that, placed into a completely different ecosystem like Texas, with different climate, vegetation, and prey behavior, they would act the same way we just witnessed in that footage. So what's the real solution for Texas? Perhaps it doesn't lie in simply copying an animal wholesale from somewhere else. A more viable answer may lie in America's own history instead. The question of a controlled restoration of the native predators that once existed here, like gray wolves or mountain lions, a path that comes with just as much controversy of its own. Placed side by side, the two pictures make the difference clear. In Texas, humans are shouldering the role of apex predator entirely alone. Thermal cameras, phone-controlled traps, helicopters, professional hunters, all of it costly, all of it requiring constant human operation, and all of it combined has only ever managed to hold wild boars back, never to defeat them. In Australia, farmers also have to fight with nearly identical tools, traps, bait, helicopter hunting. Damage still runs into the hundreds of millions of Australian dollars every year. There's no magic at work here either. But there's one extra layer of defense that costs humans nothing to maintain. A native predator quietly doing its job every night, with no orders and no budget. To be clear, so there's no misunderstanding, the dingo isn't a magic fix for all of Australia's problems. The country still suffers heavy losses to wild boars every year. And the dingo itself faces threats from humans too. Due to conflict with the livestock industry, it's still hunted, trapped, and poisoned in many areas, just like the wild boars are. So what's the real lesson here? It isn't bring dingoes to Texas. The lesson runs deeper than that. In any ecosystem, a native predator, one that evolved alongside that land over thousands of years, always plays a role that no technology, no matter how advanced, can ever fully replace. When humans remove a link from the food chain, the cost doesn't disappear. It just shifts form, from a quiet evening of a gray wolf out on the plains into hundreds of millions of dollars spent every year to try to redo that exact same job with machines. From the cornfields of Texas torn up every night to a fence stretching more than 3,400 miles across the Australian continent, this story isn't really just about wild boars. It's about an ecosystem thrown out of balance hundreds of years ago, when humans, wanting to protect their livestock, removed natural predators from the picture. And now, we're left doing the job nature once did for free, with tax dollars, with technology, with hundreds of millions spent every year, and still never fully winning. The dingo isn't the answer to simply transplant into Texas, but it is a reminder. Sometimes the most sustainable solution isn't found in inventing a new tool, but in restoring something that once existed. So what about you? If you were the one making the decision, would you keep pouring money into technology every year, or take the risk of restoring a natural predator lost long ago? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Thanks so much for watching until the end. If you liked the video, please hit like and subscribe to World Enigma. It really helps me keep making more content like this. See you in the next one.